Hey, Jean. You're on mute. Hey, Ethel.
Okay, Madeline.
How are you? Yeah, I know. I like that look. Oh, okay. Jean's there. Linda. So, is Carol gonna take notes, or you want me to take notes?
I can do it. I'll do it.
Okay.
It's awfully bright. Let's see.
All right, Stewart, we're glad to see you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Be right back.
Madeline.
Yeah, where are you?
Linda Sherman.
Hi, Linda. How are you?
Hi, thank you. Did you get my forward with
I-
the article? Okay.
Yes, yes. I thought I thanked you, but you know.
Oh, you may have. I'm just, me and my computer. We're
Yes.
sometimes enemies and sometimes friends. So
Yes, yes.
just wanted to
Sure
double.
it says never fully an enemy and never fully a friend.
Okay, just checking. Nice to see
Oh.
everyone.
Good to see you.
Thank you for inviting us and letting us in to hear Stewart's upcoming news about our
Oh,
legislature.
yes. What he has to say is always important and enlightening.
It is. Thank you. And thank you, Stewart, for coming.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm like everybody, it's a weird time and I'm pretty frazzled, but we'll talk a little bit about it and it might be useful for folks.
Hey, Stewart,
Yes.
could you maybe tip your screen or something just a little bit? I'm seeing a lot of ceiling. Yeah, that's just okay. Yeah, back maybe a little bit. Back the other way, maybe.
Yeah, there.
How about
There you
that?
go.
Yeah.
This is my first time with the Zoom meeting with you folks. So if I do anything wrong, I know to mute things, but if I do anything wrong, you will not hurt my feelings by telling me. Okay? I have a sign over here that says, Linda, don't talk too much. So it won't hurt my feelings.
I think all of us have signs on our computers telling us what to do. We'll give it a few more minutes, make sure that people are up and on before we get started.
There you are.
Hey, Susan.
Hey. Let's see if I can make it brighter. That's right.
Okay, we'll give it a minute, one more minute, and then we'll start since Stewart always has important things to say that we need to hear.
Madeline, can I go ahead and ask Tracy something?
Sure.
Hey, Tracy, did it all work out so far?
Yes, I have it. You're ready to go. So I guess you
Great.
can just say next slide or something.
Yeah.
Oh, Stewart, you've gotten high tech.
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. Except I'm only high tech when my associate Colleen is in town and can do it.
And
I'm traveling today, so
Yeah.
I had to
Marion,
5 minutes ago. I'm sorry.
oh, that's right. Tracy, I sent you an email to get out to everyone. So I hope you saw that.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Okay, so it's 12:01. Let's start. I first want to welcome you to the Hot Topics, and those of you who read your emails so that you could come on a Thursday and not on a Friday. Congratulations. I also hope you're well and safe in this very difficult time for all of us. With that being said, one of our board members suggested that I read the latest letter from Virginia Case, the executive officer of the League of Women Voters of the United States in regards to what happened yesterday. So if you'll be patient, I'm going to read this. It says, yesterday's violence in the U.S. Capitol building was an attack on our democracy, but the violence and hate of white supremacists does not come as any surprise. For months, the sitting president of the United States has refused to concede the free and fair election he lost while encouraging his supporters to somehow overturn the election. Other cities have also seen similar demonstrations and destruction of government property in the name of Trump and the lies he spews about our election. The League condemns the attack for what it was, domestic terrorism. There is no doubt about it, our democracy was shaken yesterday. But the terrorists did not win. Congress resumed their constitutional duty and ascertained Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the winners of the 2020 election and the next president and vice president of the United States. We know that there is fear and anger across this country today, but our job remains the same as it has for 100 years, empowering voters and defending democracy. We stand together today against the violent tyranny of this president and those who promote and carry out violence in his name. And it's signed in solidarity, Virginia Case, Chief Executive Officer, LWVUS. So that kind of says it all. I want to just do a heads up to those of you who are members of the League of Women Voters Nashville or Williamson County. We are we're launching on January 13th, you will be getting an email launching a effort to get to know the members and to hear your concerns and where your excitement and passions lie. So we're inviting you to what we call a conversation on moving forward. There will be a list of 7 dates. You only have to go to one of them, and you can sign up and become part of the conversation. And this will be led by myself and Debbie Gold, and it will last 1 hour, and they're different times, so you can fit it around your schedule. So I just wanted you to be aware that that's going to be coming into your email box on the 13th. That's next Wednesday. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ethel and to Stewart.
Thank you, Madeline. Before I introduce Stewart, I'd just like to let everyone know that our February hot topic will be on the 5th at 12 noon. Our speaker will be Berkeley Allen, who is presently the Metro Council person at large. She will reflect on some of the events in our city this past year and talk about what the future may hold. So we hope you will join us for that. Our speaker today is Stewart Clifton. Most of us know Stewart. Doesn't need much introduction because he is a member of the League of Women Voters, and he's been the League's registered lobbyist on Capitol Hill for many years. But I will share just a bit about him. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from Vanderbilt University and is also a graduate of Vanderbilt's Law School. He served on the Metro Council from 1987 to 1999 and has also served on the Metro Planning Commission. He presently heads up Clifton Government Relations, which represents several nonprofit organizations in Tennessee. He regularly presents about the public policymaking process and delivers substantive workshops on public issues to a variety of groups. We're pleased to have him with us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stewart. Welcome.
Thank you, Ethel. I'd like to say two preliminary things before getting into the content. One is to thank Tracy, because at the last minute, the plans we had made on my end to have somebody advance this PowerPoint all fell through for various technological reasons, which I'm sure none of which were my fault, I'm sure. And secondly, I called Ethel yesterday to say that with the events of yesterday being so momentous and overwhelming, that I wasn't sure we should just treat today as business as usual. And she decided that no, we definitely want to acknowledge what a critical time it is, but it's not a time to simply neglect what we were here for originally and the specifics of legislative work in the upcoming session. So I did want to acknowledge that it has been a very sobering time, obviously, for everyone on this Zoom call, and for me. And yet, I guess on second reflection, the detailed work that the League members do on issues that we can have an impact on and make a strong statement about, while maybe not as earth-shattering or as emotional as the events of yesterday, they're important. And the decision-making that the legislators in Tennessee will be doing starting in just on the 12th of January next week, that's important too. So I'm part of me is thinking that this is a time to double down on the kind of very specific work we do where we can make a difference, as well as be concerned about the more incredibly important national issues and tone that we've all had to think about lately. So thank you for being part of this, and we'll try to go through and see what we can learn about the upcoming legislature and some of the issues we care about. So Tracy, if you'll go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint, we'll kind of go through that. And we do have, of course, a chat room. And at the end of this, I think we'll have some time to have questions. People can submit those through the chat box, or ask me at that time, and we'll see what comes from all that. So this is the hot topics for this week is looking forward to the 112th General Assembly. And I meant that simply looking forward to in the sense of we're looking at what they're going to do. I'm not sure, in some ways we're all looking forward to what they may do, but so looking forward is a little ambiguous, but that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. Next. Some of you know many more things about state government than the basics, but we do need to kind of go over just a few things to put things in context, particularly for folks who have not really thought about it in a while. We're going to spend a good bit of time talking about what could be coming, specific issues and other changes with this legislature as a result of the elections. We're going to talk about what is successful advocacy by nonprofits, and by individuals, and then have time for questions and answers. Next. Next. So we all know this. I'm not going to read it to you, but we all know that there's a finite number of state legislators, and we all have two, one state representative, one senator, and they have this function. They enact, they amend, and they repeal our state laws. They may do a few other things like honoring people and things like this, but that's essentially what they do. Next. And some of you have seen this organizational chart of the universe. It is shows that the center of the universe is our state legislature, and other things kind of revolve around it. And if you've heard me talk about it before, I'm not trying exactly to make fun of egos or of the legislature. We all think what we do is critically important, and it happens that state legislative decisions are pretty important. It does help explain, this chart does, this illustration does help explain a little bit why we see so many times when they're limiting the executive branch or their local government branch or the judicial branch or the federal government. They do seem to have a very high opinion of how much they can control, and are very offended if the judicial or the executive branch tries to limit that, and certainly offended by anything locals do they don't like, or the federal government. This is not news to you, but it's important because it reminds us that we're dealing with people who have a lot of power, a lot of ego, and that sometimes that's not a bad thing. But we do need to understand they take what they do pretty seriously, and they believe that what they do is critically important, and we need to treat them with respect if we want to have specific success with them. Next. So we're going to memorize this chart about how a bill becomes law. Not really. We're just going to essentially say that it has to go through a lot of steps to become law. And every year there's about 1,500 bills or so that are filed, not counting a bunch of resolutions. And they have to be filed with the very same language in the House and Senate. And through the entire amendment process, they have to pass every single subcommittee or committee they're assigned to. And at the end, if it's going to become law, they have to have identical language, the House version and the Senate version. So out of 1,500 bills a year or so, about 500 become law, which is a fair amount. But it's important to realize that that's why it's such a long process. It's a lot different than the city council, the metro council, where a bill goes through 3 readings and maybe 1 committee, and it just all of a sudden it's law. The other thing to remember is that they really do like to get in and out. And when you assume that they're going to be spending a lot of time on the budget, the next few weeks will be very critical for the state, because they'll be looking at a whole lot of bills, and we need to pay very close attention to it as league members and as individuals who may have our own interest in beyond just league issues. Next. So there were very few new legislators elected in 2020. There were 10 new representatives, none from Davidson County. There were 2 new senators, including 1 from Davidson County, Heidi Campbell, who was our speaker last month, and also Paige Wally, a state senator now, who used to be a representative many years ago from rural West Tennessee. So because of people not retiring, there were there was just less change than usual. So it's not like we have a lot in terms of our area, and also Williamson had no changes either, I believe. So that's where we are. And the party breakdown in the Senate, there's 1 more Democrat now, which means there are 6. So it's 27 to 33, as you can see from the blue and red. And in the House, it's the exact same number. There's some new members, but the party situation numbers-wise did not change. Next. Previous and potential leaders. Most of these are actually leaders because they're caucus leadership of the Republican and House caucus. And I think it's important for you to know because a whole lot of these are from Davidson County. And they have been elected by their caucus members of their own party. And then there are the officers of the body, the Speaker of the House, and we'll go to the Senate in a few minutes. And those have not been elected because they're elected by the whole body, and they come back next Monday. And there's every reason to believe that Cameron Sexton is in fact going to be reelected Speaker by the 99 representatives. And we do not know, and most of these other caucus folks have already been elected. We don't know what will happen from there because we don't know what he's going to do for regarding committees and committee leadership. But that's a very important thing to see exactly how these leaders operate. And it's probably worth everybody knowing that we do have quite a number of Davidson County representatives on the Democrat side, of course, because they're all Democrats in Davidson County, who have positions of authority in the caucus. And that's, I think, next on this. Next. The Senate is the same thing. Lieutenant Governor Nally is not elected yet, but he will be because he has been selected as the caucus nominee to be Lieutenant Governor. And so he will be elected next week. And at that time, we'll appoint committee chairs and others. For people who might be here from Williamson County, Jack Johnson has been, I think, elected already by the Republican caucus as their party leader for the year. And Jeff Yarborough is expected to remain as the Democratic caucus leader, who is obviously from Davidson County. Also on this page is a person who is in many ways the most important legislator for Davidson County on certainly this page and probably in the Senate. And you might find that hard to believe, but Farrell Hale is in fact the most important legislator of important senator from Davidson County. And many of you are wondering why you didn't know he was from Davidson County, because he's not. He's from a different county, but he has a certain part of the county. And he's a Republican and a very respected Republican. I'm not saying he's necessarily someone we all will agree with on everything, but he is a leader in the Republican caucus, has been there for several years, and represents not a whole quarter of this county, but certainly a big chunk of it. The other county I believe he has is Robertson. And if there's one specific takeaway from today, it's important for league members from Davidson County to build a relationship with him. Not that he'll agree on all of our issues, but he is someone we have perhaps not paid as much attention to because many of our members don't live in that part of the county. Moving on. I wanted to go through real quick and not in any great detail who our representatives are in Davidson County. As you're seeing these faces, remember that they are the ones who will pay the most attention to you. There are ways to build relationships with legislators who don't represent you, who aren't in your part of the state. And that's particularly something we can do well as a league, because it's not just about who we know, but who we know collectively. And the league has quite a strong presence, quite a strong name recognition, and people know who we are. But people who represent you or represent the county where you live, and therefore they assume you know people that can vote for or against them, are pretty important. So Bill Beck is a state representative and has been for some time. Like many Democrats, he's able to pass quite a few bills. It's not true and hasn't been true that even though it's majority Republican, that Democrats have not passed bills in the House. It's just that some do better at that than others, and some simply have chosen to be more prophetic and perhaps more controversial, and they have trouble passing any bills. So Bill Beck is someone who will pass most of his bills. Next. John Ray Clemons is a party leader, not an elected party leader, but he's sort of on the other end of that. Representative Clemons, my state representative, considers himself a voice on important issues and is less concerned with whether he passes specific bills as making the case for what he thinks is right. Neither one of these are, that's a little overbroad about those two folks, but you get the idea. There's different styles among our legislators. Moving through this quickly now, the next slide. Vince Dixie I think starts his second term this year and has been elected to the House leadership. He succeeded Mike Stewart as the caucus chair, which is a very important part of the Democratic caucus, obviously, and defeated two other Davidson County representatives, and is sort of an up-and-coming star, I believe, of the party, who has met with the league before, as have most of these folks. Next. Bob Freeman was reelected this last year in a district that Speaker Hallwell used to hold, and is considered also to be someone who is something of a rising star in the county and in the legislative body. Next. Darren Jernigan is a veteran now. He's former council member, a veteran legislator who, like Bill Beck, passes most of their bills and works very hard to have friends across the aisle. Next. Harold Love is the same. He's a very powerful legislator whose father was also a legislator, and has very strong friendships with people in both parties, and does his homework and passes a good number of his bills. Next. Bo Mitchell, very hardworking legislator from the Bellevue area and other areas, and former council member. Next. Jason Potts, who's actually Bo Mitchell and Jason Potts have met with the league in the last few years. Jason Potts starts his second term and I think wants to look to the league for some leadership on things about these issues, because he's a former council member, and he basically has told me that he wants input from people on important bills because he's not sure about the ones that are not part of his committee. So he's looking for our input. Next. Jason Powell has now served for many years on the state legislature, does a good job. And I know this is I'm going to tie this together a little bit at the end. Next. And Mike Stewart, who is no longer caucus chair because I think he decided he'd done it long enough. And many of you know Mike, and he's a very, very good lawyer, very respected lawyer, and many of these folks are semi-retired, to put it bluntly, and Mike is not. He is a very hardworking lawyer as well as a state representative, and I think he's happy not to be the caucus chair, is my understanding. Next. Heidi Campbell we talked about and heard from last month. Next. Brenda Gilmore, who's a member of the league and speaks to us quite often, and is a very effective legislator. And then the final person from Davidson County on the Senate side. Oh, Farrell Hill. No, he's not the final person, but I was wrong. It wasn't Robertson. It was Sumner, Trousdale, and part of Davidson. So it's the northern part of our county. And I really think that's an action step that the league might think about, to reach out to him and have a Zoom call and talk about some of our priorities. Next. Jeff Yarborough, my senator, who is the Democratic leader of the Senate, and I suppose will be again. And I think we know Senator Yarborough because he's spoken to us many times about important issues to us, elections and many others. I think that might be it. Next. Okay, so why do I take the time in this to just go through that? It's basically to set up this slide, which is, who are they? How do we find out more than what I just said? And it's not that hard. This is one of the main things I wanted to emphasize today. There is a way to learn who these legislators are and get to know them that will benefit the issues the league cares about and that you may care about yourself personally. There's a way to very easily do strategic research on these legislators, the ones who represent you, others in your county, maybe others on committees you care about. What are their affiliations? What have been their statements on key issues? Who are their donors? Do they give money to any groups that you might want to know about? Where do they go to college? It's a way to help identify people within our organization who might have connections with these legislators, not just the new ones, but any of them. So this is what lobbyists do. They try to figure out every way they can, what makes this person tick, who are they? And that's true of a volunteer lobbyist, I think, who wants to be successful as well as a paid lobbyist. It may seem odd, but I don't recommend this to everybody, but I essentially follow everyone from Davidson County and many other parts of the state on Facebook and Twitter. I do not post a lot, but it's important to know what they care about. What do they think is important enough to talk about? What votes did they think were specifically great? And just what makes them tick. So there's all sorts of ways to use social media appropriately. Obviously, some people spend all their time on social media and annoy the rest of us, but I'm serious. If you're at all interested in getting to know your own representative and others better, an easy way to do it is just follow them. You don't ever have to post yourself, but follow them. One thing that really stood us in great stead with Senator Dickerson, who was in fact very accessible to the league, as you all know, was that we got together with him right after he was elected 8 years ago. At that time, they had this stuff called in-person meetings. You could kind of go to somebody's house and meet with somebody. That's no longer the case, as we know, but the same thing can happen with Zoom meetings. And it's kind of what we did with his successor, Heidi Campbell, who spoke with us last meeting. But if you personally and the league itself can schedule things by Zoom and to get to know new legislators or people who are new to you and new to our organization. There's other ways to be creative and find out specific things about these legislators and their staffers, who are almost as important as the legislators. Let's move on. For people who are new to all this, the state website is an invaluable thing to know about. And it's a very good website. Technically, it's one of the best in the country. And this slide is just for you to realize that there is a way to list your own bills, the ones you care about, and get reports on them and be able to bring it up easily by going to this page and clicking on My Bills and following the direction. There's also a video talking about the legislative process and how to use the state website to keep up with the bills you care about and what amendments are and all of that. And if you have moved recently, you might want to just double check who your legislator is and simply putting the address in, and that will tell you who your House and Senate members are. So the state website is something that I just, whenever I talk to groups about how to get involved, that is a crucial thing. You can make up for not being able to be there, particularly this year when nobody's going to be there to speak of, by using that. So let's move on. What could be coming our way in this new General Assembly? Next. Redistricting could be coming our way. In fact, it will be coming our way. There's not a concrete deadline for when they have to have that done, except we know it has to be by April of 2022, because that's when everyone has to file if they want to be a candidate for state legislature or Congress. So it has to be done well before that. So I imagine they'll be working on it a great deal. League leadership and I talked with people last year, and including the Speaker of the House, who promised to have an open process on redistricting, but they have not been forthcoming about any specific steps they're taking or when things will be happening, although some members of this group may have heard things that I haven't. But redistricting will be an important thing. As you know, that's somewhat political. It was certainly that under Democrats, and it is certainly that now under Republicans. They will be trying to make sure that their own districts are safe, first and foremost. there are issues with splitting counties, but it can be done without being illegal. And there has already been much discussion this year about carving up counties in such a way that, for instance, in Congress, where Davidson County would not have its own congressperson, different parts would go to different areas for partisan reasons. And that can also happen and has happened at the state level. So the league will be following redistricting very, very closely. And we are happy with what we've heard so far in broad general terms about openness, but we just want to follow it and keep everyone apprised of what's going on. Elections is always one of our key issues. And we don't know yet because they have been filing bills very, very slowly. It's less than 5% of the bills have been filed. I'm sure something like 35 bills maybe. So we don't know what all the bills will end up being on any of these areas, but we know there'll be election bills. We know that there will be bills from our point of view that would be helpful, like automatically reinstating voting rights upon release from incarceration. We know that people will have progressive ideas about voter registration efforts, and other people will have ideas that we will be unhappy with that will decrease the possibility of large turnouts and will be more restrictive than current law. So there's a whole bunch of election issues, none of which have gotten to be too concrete yet. Open government is a key issue for us, where we have a great deal of success as members of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. And that's a bipartisan issue. Open government is a critically important issue to many Republicans and many Democrats, and we will follow all of those issues again. Next. Healthcare. And, there are two ways, obviously the State League has a very active advocacy committee, and we prioritize with the leadership of our advocacy committee and our officers. But usually healthcare is in there, and I'm not saying all of these bills will necessarily be things we care about, but there are many that we will. And here are some: Medicaid expansion in Tennessee is one way to call it. Surprise billing. I was on a call this morning with league members and people in other organizations, healthcare organizations, with Bo Watson, the head of the Senate Finance Committee, and Representative Robin Smith, who may be the head of the House Committee. We don't know that for sure yet. And they're trying to pass a positive surprise billing bill. I'm not an expert on that, but we will be probably interested in that. We'll see if it becomes a priority for the league or not, but something that you would be interested in hearing about, and I'll try to follow it in my legislative reports. There's a big push to change the authority about who has the authority for health policy decisions at the county level. This is an effort coming out of East Tennessee areas to prohibit health departments from making health policy decisions and having county mayors do it. Don't think I like that bill, but it will be a serious bill this next year. There'll be a bill in fact, there's already a bill filed to prohibit mandatory COVID vaccinations and to prohibit any government restrictions on how many people can congregate. So those are a few health-related bills or concepts to watch. Next. Let me take just 1 minute and find a note I have. Yeah, because I don't want to forget this. This is not a substantive issue, but a process concern that I think you'll be interested in. The legislature is going to be very different this next year. So before we go into education, I just want to mention that because of COVID, there are a lot of changes. I've heard, but haven't followed up, that somebody has made a suggestion that we have an all virtual legislative session. That's not going to happen. They've already been talking about the specifics of how to make it a safer place, and it's going to be very different. There is going to be no mask requirement at the legislature for legislators because the speaker has ascertained that it is not clear if it helps. Speaker Sexton has opined that as of yesterday. I don't plan to be at the legislature as much, by the way, in part because of rules like that. On the other hand, there are some others. There's antibacterial mist that they are implementing. They have provided a little more space between legislators and the chambers and in committee rooms. There will be no days on the Hill. There will be no legislative receptions. There will have to be only scheduled office visits, which is very different for lobbyists. You can't just wander down and try to catch somebody after a committee meeting or before a committee meeting. You have to make an appointment before the day of. And so that's also going to apply to citizen folks. And it's going to make it harder to get through. I think legislators have by and large been very eager and willing to Zoom with groups, maybe not on the spur of the moment, but that I would encourage us to realize that we can, just as I did this morning with a couple of folks, talk with them other than just on the phone through a Zoom. But it's going to be a lot less direct interaction. So those are just some things to think about process-wise, not just as upcoming issues. But I look for it to be a fairly quick session. But there will be other bills that we can talk about. And here they are. There's a special session that starts. I think I can't see from my, you can see it better than I can because of the way my stuff is. Yeah, January 19th is the special session of the legislature dealing with the pandemic impacts on education and learning loss. We do not, and that's the governor's call to have that special session. We don't know what will be discussed there, what he has in mind. We do know that the legislature is not bound by what he says he's called it for. They can do anything they want to during a special session. It's unusual to have a special session the week after they start, but he wanted to emphasize the importance of those issues and his hopes that we could find a way to address that. Other education issues, vouchers will be revisited. As you know, the state has been sued over vouchers and it has gone the way we would hope because we have a position against vouchers. And for those of you who were wondering, in court, they filed papers saying, well, Your Honor, we know you're upset that this is only in 2 counties, but let us assure you it will be in every county. So don't worry about that, which is interesting from a standpoint of what legislators were told when they vote for it. And there will be some very angry people if the state really does try to start moving forward with more counties. Obviously, they can't right now under the existing law until it gets overturned or changed because the courts have prohibited that. Another education bill of interest is school social workers. We have very, very small number of social workers who are actually trained school social workers and work there in schools and with school systems. Even those social workers can in fact link folks to resources and have an excellent understanding usually of family dynamics and could just make learning and education in times like these much better. So that will be an issue to watch for. On the environment, and of course, the league is a member of Tennessee Conservation Voters. We'll be following a lot of bills. A lot of them we don't know. Some will be defensive. Some of the positive bills will be ones that would deal with single-use plastics. We have a strong champion in that. And tire recycling improvements, which didn't happen last year, but came close. We'll be fighting about efforts to reduce water protection regulations, particularly brought by home builders and others, and then combating lead in drinking water in public schools. We expect all those to be interesting issues. Next. Immigrants and refugees remains a huge issue. There'll be continued efforts to continue banning refugee resettlement in Tennessee, which has been halted by the courts. I think we're the only state that's tried to do that. And it's something that I think many league members are interested in. Criminal justice, community-based alternatives to confinement is only one of many bills that we'll be perhaps watching. A lot of miscellaneous bills. There's one's already been filed for legal bingo for nonprofits. Some of you who've lived here for a few years know that that's been fairly easy to exploit and criminalize. But we'll see if time is it's elapsed on some of that, and the legislature wants to reestablish bingo as a nonprofit fundraising thing. There's a bill already in to redesignate the Legislative Plaza as the Ida B. Wells Barnett Plaza, and a bill already in to say that a person's gender is the birth gender for any interscholastic athletics. As I say, these are just a few of the bills that will be filed. Moving on. Just a few things. I'm hoping we're leaving some time for questions. Because I see we have 7 according to just looking at the chat thing. Just a few quick reminders on advocacy skills. Next. These are things you don't want to do. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I've looked at some of the names on this call, and I think most of you know this and would not do any of these things anyway. But it's important to remember there's an art to advocacy, an art to talking with legislators, and this is part of it. There'll always be another issue. You don't want to burn bridges with legislators and all the rest that are there. Just a reminder. Next. This is about organizational and personal relationships. The league has relationships, and you have relationships with legislators. And they're not always going to do what we want, but it's kind of a firm conclusion I've reached over the years that there are no permanent friends in legislative work. There are no permanent enemies. And this is our clever little illustration from happier days when people got along a little bit better, apparently. Next. Next is questions. I feel like I've left out a couple of things, but on the other hand, I've almost filled up more time than I meant to if we're going to have questions. And let me just go to that. I'll go to Deborah Fisher, who's asking about Dickerson, who was actually a real friend as chair of Senate, state, and local government on open government issues. Have I heard who will be the new chair? I have not. It would only be gossip because every year the speakers change some of the chairpersonships in both the House and Senate, and they do not announce that until they are back in session and are fully elected. Because right now the Lieutenant Governor and House Speaker are not elected by the body. So I don't know. I'll ask around about that. But losing him as chair will be a problem for us on some key issues because he was on our side on the elections and open government, both of which went through that committee. I don't know about the pandemic question about is people on the Hill, are people on the Hill worried about how the state is handling the pandemic crisis and also issues with getting shots to everyone? There's a lot of talk about it in the media. It actually appears in some ways that even though it's not what anyone expected, the shots we're doing better than most states on sheer numbers. I don't think we are necessarily in terms of process, and there's a lot of uncertainty. But I have not, there's been actually much less interaction with people, with state officials, elected and otherwise, even though we've all tried to use Zoom and whatnot. There have certainly been less opportunities to just casually talk to people and gossip about things. Um, is it typical for the caucuses to select brand new members to leadership? No, but it can happen. There's nothing that says it can't. Now, I'm not sure. I think the slides I showed you about leaders and for the House and Senate Democratic and Republican caucuses, they're not in stone yet. They're sort of they're almost in stone because the caucuses have already met to do that. It's not like the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor. So I think that ship has sailed already. Someone's raised an issue about broadband. It is an issue that impacts the state of Tennessee, and it has been moving forward with some renewed momentum, partly because of the use by medical professionals and social workers and counseling professionals and all sorts of folks in this time of pandemic. Broadband access is being positively impacted by the needs for the medical community and whatnot to expand it. It's still a problem in rural areas, but we seem to be moving forward on that, and I think it'll be more of an issue this year as well. Let's see. What are the differences in duties and influence in the legislature between a party leader and a party chairman? Sally, I guess you're thinking in terms of the state party chair of the respective parties. And it is very different. I mean, part of the purpose of any party is organized state party is to elect their members to public office at the state level, executive branch and legislative branch. And I'm not entirely sure about that question. It might not have been that you were talking about the Tennessee Democratic Party and Republican Party. But there is a difference between the party and the entire legislature. I mean, we do have such a partisan atmosphere there that it doesn't seem like there is much. So I'm going to have to just skip that one because I'm not sure I can get at what you are thinking with that question. Marion's raised an issue that I've been worried about. She says, I'm concerned that there will be a draconian backlash on voting laws as a result of the election fraud charges across the country. And I don't think that will have dissipated because of the events of yesterday and the outrage people feel in both parties about that, just because a lot of people have been successfully sold the idea that our election was tainted in some way. I think there'll be less after this week. But our state Republican Party and its legislative members, by and large, were certainly not for expanding ease of voting, to put it mildly. I have been worried very much that there will be efforts to roll back court decisions saying, well, the pandemic is no longer here or not as here as it used to be. That's not true yet, but they may make that argument. And I don't know. I mean, we certainly have not been successful at the state level on most of our efforts to expand access to voting. The courts have helped, as you know. So that's one of the main things we'll be watching this year, I'm sure. Let's see. That's most of the questions there. There may be some questions that you have though orally. I think we might still have a little bit of time.
We do. I guess, Stewart, I would like to ask about the election of the constitutional officers and the retirement of Justin Wilson as controller, and what, if anything, you expect to happen there.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down and lost my note, but Justin Wilson, many of you know of, and has been serving in that role for something like 12 or 13 years. And before that was deputy governor, things like that. And actually the comptroller's office under his leadership has continued to be highly regarded, as it was under other comptrollers. And people are a little bit worried because he did have the respect of both parties and was quite a lot of fun, as well as being totally honest. So he's retiring and he's anointed his successor, but he doesn't get to vote on his successor. His hope is that Jason Mumpower will be chosen, who has been sort of his number two, and he's a former state representative from Northeast Tennessee. I have not heard much about that. I do know that they're expecting the decision to be made very soon in January, so we won't have very long to wait. I think they usually elect, normally re-elect, but this year there'll be a new one, elect the constitutional officers at the very beginning of the year. So I have not heard of anybody who is challenging Jason Mumpower, but I wouldn't necessarily hear that. Would you like to elaborate on your question though? Or, I mean, not specifics about people, but do you agree with me that the comptroller's office continues to have a pretty strong positive image among all parties and whatnot?
Sure. I guess I have to, confess that I worked there for 27 years before Justin, so I do have some bias. But the controller's office, I guess, is an office that people don't always pay much attention to, but it has incredible influence and power in the running of Tennessee state government, in terms of the finances, in terms of the oversight of what goes on. Property assessments at the local level are overseen by the controller. It is involved in local government redistricting. There's just a whole range of functions that the state controller has, and it has historically been a mostly nonpartisan office that focuses on trying to find out what the facts are, and I think has done fairly well at that. Although it is elected, the controller is elected by the legislature. So
Right.
Anyway, it is just, in the treasurer and secretary of state, I mean, the league deals with the secretary of state quite a bit. Those are our three constitutional officers, and they have a great deal of influence in the running of the state. So that's really why I ask. I'm curious about it, and just was wondering if you'd heard anything.
I have not. And Marion had a question about, does Trey Hargett have to be reappointed? And yes, those constitutional officers are elected or re-elected every January, every new term. So they'll be up, and I haven't heard of any possibility that Trey Hargett would be in trouble, or that the state treasurer would be. Obviously, for our purposes of those three, we deal a lot more with elections, which is under the Secretary of State's office. So we have no idea what will happen on that one, but we don't have any inside information. Nobody does, but there's probably something like 100% chance that he'll be reappointed.
I see a question on what about right to work, and
yeah.
what's happening with that issue.
Oh, there's a bill to forbid any sort of right to work in Tennessee that has already been filed, and it will probably pass. Is it a bill or a constitutional amendment? I'm drawing a blank right now. Tennessee's labor movement is not very powerful right now and has been more so in the past, but the Republican caucus in the House and Senate are certainly not, outside of state employees who do a great job of being bipartisan and getting a lot of what they need. The legislature does not like organized labor, and they don't like right to work. So I think that we can expect something like that to pass. It's 12:55. I think we have a few more minutes, and just wondering if people have.
You've got one more question, that you predicted that the upcoming session would be short, and they're wondering why you think that.
Well, it's just no fun anymore, you know. You don't have lobbyists taking you out to eat a lot and stuff because of the COVID. And I don't know that I have a lot to other than intuition about that. I think people last year, they had this long interval while when they went home for a good bit in the middle of the session. I guess I'm just thinking that it really is a different atmosphere now because of COVID. And I think it's not much fun for legislators to be here. Many of them are retired, as you know. Many of them continue to practice their profession or have other jobs. And I believe that it will be a shorter session than we used to have. I don't have a prediction of exactly what time, but that's my guess, that between concerns over the pandemic and maybe the fact that they're not, this legislature as a whole is not exactly looking to pass new laws so much as to do their business, pass a budget, maybe get back to the home place. That's my guess. There are people on this call who might have very different ideas about that. I'm wondering, Ann, if you do, Ann Carr, do you have any thoughts about that one?
Well, I try not to think about it anymore, Stewart.
I know, I think you do a pretty successful job of not thinking about it. You stay totally away from it, which is understandable.
And in 3 years, a lot has changed. So I'm counting on you.
Yeah, it's always been a mystery to me when they would go home. I mean, I feel like I'm right, but it's more a hunch that this year I'd be very surprised if they stayed very long.
Well, I think you're right. And it's not an election year, so they don't have to all get in the headlines. So I think you're right.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to pull that on you with no advance warning.
No, that's okay.
Okay, I guess there's online, there's some discussion about the constitutional amendment on right to work, that it is a constitutional amendment to make Tennessee a right to work state. Question, there's a comment for your information, emergency use authorized vaccines can't be mandated. And I don't know anything about that if we need to comment. Debbie Gould would like to announce first of all, I guess I would just say thank you to Stewart. We really appreciate you taking your time both to speak with us and to represent us. So online applause for him. And Debbie Gould would like to announce the State Advocacy Committee meetings. So Debbie?
Right. So one of the nice things about being a league member is you really get to be an active volunteer citizen lobbyist along with Stewart's guidance. And every year during the state legislative session, the State League pulls together a state advocacy committee meeting on a regular basis during the legislative session to discuss upcoming bills, a lot of the bills that Stewart's already highlighted as things we really care about, and really tries to think out what is the most effective way that league members can interact and get our voice heard with state legislators. So if you are interested, I have my email in the chat box, debbiegould@bellsouth.net, and let me know if you would like to be on the email list so that you know when the upcoming advocacy committee members meet. It is open to league members, and we will have our first meeting Monday, January 25th, beginning at 11:30 a.m. So that's all I needed to say about that. Thank you, Ethel.
Oh, you're welcome. I think we've reached 1 o'clock. Is anybody else have something for the good of the order? In that case, I thank all of you for tuning in to our hot topic. We hope to see you in the meetings coming up, both that Madeline discussed and our hot topic in February. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.